Here with me now, Meet the Press moderator, Kristen Welker, and USA Today Washington Bureau Chief Susan Page. I love saying Meet the Press moderator.
Thank you, Katie.
I know it's not going to get old for me. I think this is so remarkable because you have the president, Joe Biden, going on interview after interview, saying over and over again, I'm not leaving the race, 1,000%, not leaving, not leaving, not leaving. But the Democrats are continuing to say, you got to leave. Publicly and privately.
You're right. And it feels like right now they're saying we can do this the easy way or the hard way. The easy way, he has been confronted by Leader Schumer, by Speaker Emerita Pelosi with these poll numbers, these pleas saying, look, the rest of the party is being dragged down with you at the top of the ticket. Really tough conversations. The fact that these conversations are now leaking out into the public in the wake of more defiance by President Biden saying he's not going to drop out tells you everything you need to know about the pressure that is happening around him. The fact that Congressman Adam Schiff came out is so significant because he's a Pelosi ally. He would not have gone out and called for the president to drop out of the race without Speaker Pelosi's sign off. And the one thing I think, just big picture, I spoke with a Democratic lawmaker today who said it really feels like the ground is shifting.
Yeah. I spoke with one who said that they believe that there are more people that are going to come out this week. There are other lawmakers who are considering it. Just on the subject of the leaked conversations, Susan, the fact that they're leaking, putting pressure on him, but the fact that they're leaking at all means these are people who think Joe Biden's not listening. Easy way or hard way, as Kristen mentioned, it sounds like they're ready to go down the hard route.
Yeah, well, we've seen the easy way, the private way, since the debate. Yeah. This is not new. Speaker Emerita Pelosi has been talking to lawmakers and gathering data. She loves Joe Biden, but she is unsentimental when it comes to calculating elections. And the fact that she has gone basically more public through Adam Schiff's voice, through leaks about her own actions, means that she's prepared to drop what would be a nuclear bomb, which is to publicly call on Biden to step back. I think that the president is now in an untenable situation. And the question now is when, not whether.
I mean, you guys know her so well. Would she go to him first and say, I'm going to come out publicly and say this?
I would think that she would. I don't think she would blindside the president. And that's why there has been an attempt to give him some space, Katie, with these conversations, for him to make up his own mind. His inner circle is getting tighter, though. And as Gabe was reporting, our sources are telling us that he is expressing a willingness, an openness to really have more candid conversations.
How much time do they have to give him at this point? I mean, the DNC is fast approaching. There's that virtual roll call. Can they really go ahead with the virtual roll call?
There's not a reason to do a virtual roll call. There was once. Ohio changed the law that forced them to move up the nomination. That's a ruse now, not a reason to have a virtual. It's a way to keep Biden in the mix. So you're definitely not going to see it next week. And I wonder if it gets pushed back to the convention, because this is going to be a really messy situation. But senior Democrats, the leaders in the House and the Senate and elsewhere in the country, have decided that chaos is preferable to the status quo.
Which is intense. I mean, how do you survive a conversation like this? If we continue to have this conversation, Joe Biden stays in the race. I mean, I got to imagine the Democrats will understand that that is going to be a killer for his campaign if you have the Democratic Party still questioning whether he can be the leader of the party.
Absolutely. And it comes against the backdrop of here we are at the Republican National Convention, Katie, and the unity that we have seen on display has been one of the big headlines this week. You were there in 2016 when the Republican Party was very divided, and it is so different. And you talk about the ticking clock. The fact that they are looking at these images coming out of the RNC is only adding to the urgency to make a decision. And you're right. I think from the perspective from President Biden, it just becomes very difficult to stay in when you have these growing calls for him.
He has said that he needs to be shown that he can't win. There's reporting now that he's been shown some really bad battleground polling where he's losing significantly, and not just him, but he's, as we were talking about, dragging down other Democrats. Is that what he needs to see?
You know, an Emerson College poll out this morning showing him trailing in Virginia. Virginia is a reasonably safe blue state these days. If he loses in Virginia, you're looking at a landslide for Donald Trump. You saw other polling that came out yesterday that showed almost any other Democrat they tested did better than Biden did in swing states, including Kamala Harris, including Mark Kelly, including Gretchen Whitmer. So if that was his standard, they are now able to show actual public data, which we assume is reflected in private data as well, that shows he is no longer the strongest candidate for the Democratic
Party. How do they
Party.
go about this? So if President Biden does decide to step aside, you have to imagine that there's a conversation being had about how to roll it out and what to suggest next, not just him coming out and saying, I'm done, figure it out now. What are those conversations going to be like?
Well, all signs are pointing to the fact that President Biden would likely pass the torch to his vice president, to Kamala Harris. You see that type of signaling and messaging from Congressman Clyburn, for example, who has said that, yes, if Biden were to drop out, he would support the vice president. But you're right, Katie, there is going to be a messiness to this. And by the way, that messiness is part of what has prevented President Biden from dropping out to date.
Does there have to be a messiness? I mean, if he says, I'm going to pass this to Kamala Harris.
Inevitable moment of what happens next. And that's what Democrats are, to some extent, dreading, but as Susan said, to some extent, anticipating. Look, they get the headlines then. And that's something that I think they might welcome.
I was talking to voters here in Wisconsin. I left the bubble of the convention hall and went to Wauwatosa. I'm sorry, Wisconsin. And I spoke to a lot of Democratic voters, and they were resigned to Biden. I said, well, what if it was someone else? And they said, great, someone younger. Well, who could that be? They couldn't name anybody. But I think that's part of the issue.
Yeah.
Yes, there's no certainty that if Biden steps back and they go with Kamala Harris, that everything changes. But some things will change. The concern about age will go away, and about his mental acuity no longer matters. It will shake things up. For Republicans, too, running against Kamala Harris and some vice presidential nominee to be named is not the thing they've prepared for. It's not the thing that they've been conveying at this convention.
I want to read some reporting from the Washington Post. They are citing several people that former President Barack Obama has told allies in recent days that President Biden's path to victory has greatly diminished, and he thinks the president needs to seriously consider the viability of his candidacy, according to multiple people briefed on his thinking. Obama's spokesperson declined to comment. These declining to comments they do a lot of work here.
Speak volumes.
Yeah.
They speak volumes, because if that weren't the case, you would have
that absolutely
Barack
is not
Obama's
true.
spokesperson coming out and saying, yes, we completely deny this story. So it is significant. And look, we know that there have been concerns inside Obama world. We've seen that with some of the people who used to work for him openly expressing how they feel. And you have to imagine that is to some extent a reflection of how the former president.
Now, well, Obama's the most popular Democrat in the country, formerly elected Democrat. He's not the best voice to go to Joe Biden.
That's right.
They don't have that kind of relationship. The best voice to go to Joe Biden is Nancy Pelosi.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.